Hi, and welcome to this wellness series webinar on the connection between what we eat and how we feel, and on how to use nutrition to feel better. So I'm Heidi Waro. I'm a therapist and a health coach at Eden's Counseling Group, and I'm really excited to share about that topic with you today. I wanted to first apologize for the people who tried to attend the live webinar because we had technical issues and had to interrupt it. So I'm very sorry about that. But I'm very glad to be able to offer that recording to you so that you can watch it at your convenience. That topic of nutrition and mental health is really dear to my heart. And first, because I think that food is medicine, and also because I think it's key in terms of helping recover from stress and trauma. And as a therapist, I specialize in helping people heal from trauma. So that's a topic that is very important to me. All right, so we're gonna get started. And here's what we're gonna go through today. So we're gonna have two parts really. So the first part is we're gonna get curious about really understanding better that connection between body and mind, and food and mood. And we're going to try to understand it first through our personal experiences with it, to be honest, and really dig into that first. And then looking to the research and what we can learn about what are the biological mechanisms that are involved into that connection. And that's really in the logic of understanding more what's going on, to have an appreciation of what's involved, and from that understanding, I guess, bring more appreciation and kindness to our bodies and to our relationship with food as well. So the second part will be about how to improve mental health, so through food, and we're going to talk a little bit about beyond food as well. And then the last part was about the question and answers, but since it's not live, we're not going to be able to do that, but I'm going to share some further references and opportunities to get support if you're interested to continue that conversation and that exploration after watching that presentation. All right. So the first part is to really look at how we experience this mind-body connection. And since it's bidirectional, we're going to start from what's going on in the direction of from our mind to our body. And really we're going to go through a little bit of an experiment and a guided imagery to explore what happens when we are thinking of something and how it may affect our body. So the experiment I'm inviting you to do now is an imagery exercise. So I'm going to walk you through it, and we'll see if you feel anything. So I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably and take a few deep breaths right now, kind of taking the time to arrive as well. And when you're ready, you can close your eyes or lower your gaze, and then you can start imagining that you're standing in a kitchen, whether it's yours or another kitchen that maybe you have good memories from. So just take some time to imagine which kitchen you would want to visualize right now. All right, so when you have one, just settle with that one and imagine that you're entering this kitchen and start glancing around it. And as your gaze gets close to the counter, notice that there's a beautiful wooden cutting board there. And on that cutting board sits a bright yellow lemon. And you can start noticing its color, its size, its shape, And you can reach out and pick it up and noticing how it feels on your touch. So maybe the skin is smooth or slightly bumpy. You may see the end where it was attached to the tree. So just take time to watch it and feel it in your hand. And then now next to the cutting board, you may see a sharp knife. So I encourage you to return the lemon back to the cutting board and pick up the knife, holding the lemon steady in the other hand, and cut the lemon in half. So as you do this, you're feeling the knife slicing through the fruit. It may fall open, revealing the pulp and maybe the seeds inside, and then maybe some drops of juice that spill over. So now take the half of the lemon and cut it again. Make it a quarter slice. And after you put the knife down, just bring the lemon quarter up to your nose. And really make yourself aware of the citrus scent, the smell, filling up your nose. Then you may touch the lemons with your lips, notice the sensations. And then you can open your mouth and actually bite to the lemon. So whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes again and get back to the presentation. So I don't know if, most people, or some people have actual physical sensations just based on imagining that scene. And that speaks to the key role the mind plays into, basically imagining something is sometimes as real as actually living it, and the body reacts in the same way. So that illustrates the mind-body connection. And another way you can also illustrate it for yourself is seeing how you react under stress, so on mental stress. Some people may feel tension in their body, either it's in the jaw, in the neck, shoulders, back. Some people may feel it in their head, more headaches, dizziness, or in their heart, the heart racing, more chest pain, shakiness, and some people see it as digestion issues. And that's an important one that we're going to see and illustrate. We're going to understand why it's so linked, the stress and the digestion as well. So, so that's ways to notice how our mind influences our body reactions. So let's go now from the other direction, so from the body to the mind. And for that one, you can remember what you feel once you've been drinking a caffeinated drink, for example. So some people feel energized or focused. Some people feel actually calmer or sleepier. Some people feel agitated, wired, anxious, or some people don't feel much after drinking a caffeinated drink. So whatever feels right for you, that's the kind of thing that can indicate that what we drink affect our mind. And same thing for thinking of when you eat your favorite food, what goes on in your mind after that. You may feel some pleasing sensations, warmth, good memories coming up, just a feel-good feeling, for example. So that's ways in which we realize that connection from the body to the mind as well. All right. So now to understand that connection a little bit more, because sometimes it's not as clear what the influence of what we eat into how we feel. Well, doing a kind of exercise of a food mood diary can help us notice and pay more attention to what we eat and how it affects how we feel. So there's a lot of different variation of those food mood diaries on the internet, so you can pick the one that suits you, but I've picked that one where you indicate whatever you ate on the first column, putting the the time of when you ate or drank, both the drinking and the eating, and what you ingested, and then in second, in the other columns, you indicate how you felt right after that. Was it same mood or better or worse? Was it, what about your energy level? Did you feel more energized, less, the same? And how did you take that meal or drink? Where were you? With whom were you? What was your stress level? Maybe using a scale of 1 to 10. And did you experience any symptoms after that, like physical symptoms like gas, bloating, whatever? And what was your hunger level before and after? And we're going to talk more about that scale as well. And what was your overall satisfaction with that drink or meal? And you go through that throughout the day, and you don't have to do it for too many days. 3 days is usually kind of enough to give you kind of an idea of the pattern of what food does what to your mood. And you can indicate as well if you've done any physical activities that day, how many glasses of water you drank, how many hours of sleep you got, and if that night after that day was disturbed, and what was your mood right after when you woke up. So doing that exercise can actually give us a lot of information and make us more aware of what food makes you feel great or poor or focused, agitated, and all of these things. All right. So another thing that is important to become more aware of is what are our signs of physical hunger, distinguishing when it's actual physical hunger or emotional hunger. So signs of physical hunger would be more like maybe a growling stomach, or sense of stomach being empty, maybe feeling lightheaded or having a headache, feeling maybe irritable or shaky. So those would be signs of physical hunger. Emotional hunger could be more like fatigue, also it's physical things. Sometimes we are confusing hunger and thirst, actually. So that's another something to think about right away. Is, I actually may be thirsty. And then if that's not that, if it's maybe more emotional hunger, maybe what you need is actually a break. You're feeling exhausted, fatigued, you need a break, or you need to move, or you need to connect with someone. So that's signs of different needs that may not actually be hunger. And if it is hunger, then having more awareness of where are you in the scale. And so there's this little hunger fullness scale there that can be quite useful, with the one being like you're so hungry that you would eat anything. And the 10 is that you're actually you've eaten too much and you feel actually uncomfortable and you even may be in pain. And what we would want is really ideally to stay within the 4 to 7 range, which means that you would eat when you just feel a little hungry. So when you have first signs of physical hunger, but not like drastic where you have to act on it right away. You can have time to prepare, sit down, etc. And stopping when you're comfortably full, satisfied. And that may not be 100% full. It's actually probably more in the 70% full. So that's maybe something that we're not used to do. And that may mean eating more regularly, maybe every 3 hours, for example, but that's not a problem. And we're going to see that why afterwards as well. But what is more of a problem is what we actually wait too long, when we restrict too much, because that stresses the body. It gets a signal of, oh, well, food is scarce. And so it brings up all those mechanisms of first alerting you that you're really hungry and making you really increase that appetite and make you crave eating. And then it also kind of changes your metabolism, because it says, okay, well, everything needs to slow down because we're not having as much energy as we actually need. So let's slow down all those things that are not essential and could be reproductive health, for example, and store energy rather than consuming it, because we're not sure food is going to come. So that's the kind of stress that is involved into restricting food and not eating as soon as we're a little hungry. All right. So let's now that we've gone into the personal experience of that connection between the body and the mind, let's see what we can learn from the research. And here, as I said, is really just to get more understanding of what's actually involved, get more appreciation from it, and hopefully have done a good kind of middle ground where it's not too complicated or too simplified, but gives you a good view of what are the mechanisms involved, or at least what we know of them, because that's really something that is still being researched, so we don't know everything about it, definitely, but I want to share what we know, or at least some of what we know. It's not going to be exhaustive, of course. But so we're going to start from a high-level view of the body, and then we're going to dig down more towards the intestines. So we're going to zoom in little by little. So the first picture is the full body. So you see from the brain to the intestines. And so the first system that is available there is what we call central nervous system, and that's comprised from the brain and by the brain and spinal cord. And that's what we call really usually the first brain. And but then what we also have is another nervous system, which is called the autonomic nervous system. And that one has three subsystems actually. And we are usually knowledgeable about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, but maybe less about the enteric. So I'm going to present the three of them. So the sympathetic one is the one that allows us to react to a stress and get us ready to fight or flight. So it activates the muscles and gives us energy. So this is all going to use a sympathetic ganglia system that is going really along the spine. Then the parasympathetic nervous system kind of does the opposite. It's actually the one that is involved in the relaxation response after stress. And that one involves what we call the vagal nerve. And that's a red nerve that goes from the top of the spine to a lot of organs, and especially the stomach and the intestines. And we're going to see that in the other pictures as well. But very important one. So that means that the relaxation system that we have is actually very much evolving the stomach and the intestines. So the other nervous system that I mentioned is the enteric nervous system, which is the one that is actually within the gastrointestinal tract or the gut. So those are all the nerves that are actually present in the stomach and the intestines all along the GI tract. And that's what we call the second brain. And then there's another system that is not nervous. So it's not a system of nerves and neurons and the chemicals and neurotransmitters that allows the communication between the neurons, but it's the other type of system that we have, which is a chemical one. So with the hormones, etc. And that's what we call the endocrine system. And we have a lot of endocrine systems with the thyroid, with the hormonal, like male-female organs as well. But the one I wanted to illustrate here as well is the HPA axis, which is the one that is involved in the central stress response. And so just for you to visualize where those organs are, so it involves the hypothalamus and the pituitary, which are in the brain, and the adrenals that we're going to mention later on in the presentation, which are sitting on top, that's just above the kidneys. And this axis, so how it works is that when we have a stress, it sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which sends a signal to the pituitary gland, which releases chemicals that the adrenals are going to see, and the adrenals are going to release the first alarm chemical, which is the adrenaline and noradrenaline. And then the longer, like the one that takes a bit longer to get released, which is a cortisol. And those chemicals are, once the cortisol level in the blood is enough, then it sends a signal to the hypothalamus to say, okay, well, we're good, we've done our job, there's enough cortisol in there, now you can inhibit the signal and we get back to a normal baseline. level. And as we know, when there's chronic stress, the problem is that that feedback loop doesn't happen very well. It gets dysregulated, and then the cortisol level actually stays high in the blood all the time, and that creates a lot of damage to the body. Another thing that happens when there's cortisol being released is that it reorganizing the priorities. So it puts everything to support the fight-flight response, but it shuts off or reduces the other systems, like actually our neocortex that makes us think, plan, see the consequences of what we do. That tends to work less or be inhibited. And also the other systems like digestion and immune system kind of gets on the second priority as well, and are not sent as much resources, so they don't function as well. So that's kind of where this first overall view is giving us there. All right, so now another illustration of the link between the brain and the guts. And this link, it involves a bidirectional communication, as we saw when we did the connection brain, body, body, brain. And it illustrates what's going on in that one way and the other way. So a thing to know is that actually there's more neurotransmitters living in our guts than in our brain, because that's actually where they're getting produced, most of them. And the gut actually has more neurons than our spine. So that may really illustrate that first, it has really the same, a lot of the same infrastructure as the brain. It has nerves, it has neurons, it has neurotransmitters. And in a sense, it may have even a larger role to play in our mood. So that's why you see that there's a big direction between the brain and the gut, where it influences obviously the nutrients that are getting there, because we decide what we eat. So our brain has an impact on what nutrients get delivered. The stress has an impact on the microbiota in our guts, because that can really affect the balance between the good bacteria and bad bacteria, and we're going to discuss about that later as well. And on the other way, between the gut and the brain, so as we said, the neurotransmitters, because most of them are produced there, and then gets released in the brain. So it does affect, because if we don't have the right nutrients to be able to produce the neurotransmitters, then they don't get produced in the right amounts, and that can create imbalances and affect our mood. So really the gut-brain connection, as I said, affects the mood regulating chemicals, which are the neurotransmitters, but it also influences the inflammation level, the gene expression, because what our cells inside see in terms of nutrients or toxins, chemicals, level of stress affects which genes are turned off or on. And the immunity, we're going to see as well that really digestion and immunity are very well connected, because their immunity is actually sitting, a lot of our immune system is sitting in the intestines. So it does get involved here. All right, so let's see a level down, where now we see the brain at the top, then the spine, 3 levels of in the spinal cord, and then at the bottom part is the intestines, a kind of a cut of the intestines, where you see the top layers with the muscles, and then the inner membrane with the cells, which are in contact with the bacteria inside the intestines, the microbiota. And on the right, you have the picture of a cut of the intestine, and that's where you see where the nerves are located. So all the yellow parts are actually nerves. The intestines have a lot of those. And so on that picture on the left again, you see the vagal nerve again that connects the top of the spine or the bottom of the brain to this little pink cell here. And we're going to discuss about those cells more in the next slide. And what you see as well is this illustration of the immune system being so close to the digestion system, because those T cells, B cells, these are the immunity system. And actually over 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. So very interesting to see that so connected as well. Right, I think that's all we wanted to say there. So what about these little pink cells that we're seeing in the membrane of these intestines? Those are the enteroendocrine cells. And what is really interesting about them is that they have a very key role of sensing actually the food components that are arriving inside the intestines. That's what we see at the top, the food components, the protein, lipids, carbohydrates, and they are in contact with the gut microbiota, those living organisms that helps us break down the nutrients, well, transform the food into nutrients, and creates the SCFA, which are the short chain fatty acids. And so they're sensing that, both cells, and they are the one both producing hormones and neurotransmitters and releasing the hormones and neurotransmitters into the blood vessels. And they're also in contact with the nerves. So they have both a key role to play in the endocrine system, so all the chemicals, and in the nervous system through the vagal, the spinal, and the enteric nerves. So they're connected to both. So really, really interesting to see that. All right, well, we're done with the more biological understanding, and obviously those mechanisms are complex and we don't know everything about them yet. It's still being heavily researched. Nutrition is also a young science, and there's a lot that we don't know yet about the effect of certain food on our body and the individual reactions to it. But there's quite a lot that we know as well. So it's a very interesting time where we start to understand all of that. We see that there's different factors, and with different factors, there's several pathways to improve how we feel as well. So that's what we're going to get into now, and see what we can do to improve mental health through food. So I want to kind of pause here a little bit, because we're going to get into that section where I might say it's better to do this or better to do that. And I know that these discussions can be a little bit triggering. So I want to kind of put some guidelines there first. So first, there's no one diet that is right for everyone. So we can see in the world people eat very differently, and there's healthy people everywhere in the world. So there's a wide range of diets that are healthy, that can support a healthy mental state. So there's no one that is right for everyone. So listen for your body, for your individuality as well. For example, there may be something that where you have specific conditions, maybe food sensitivities that make you sensitive to the gluten or dairy or eggs or whatever. So being sensitive to that obviously is very important. If you have specific medical condition like thyroid, well, then there's cruciferous vegetables that needs to be avoided. If you had kidney implants, and you need to avoid grapefruit. So there's always individual situations that you need to be aware of, and that means listening to what your body says as well. So what I'm going to share are just guiding principles. Don't feel that because I'm mentioning all those food, you need to try everything and everything's going to be good for you. No, I encourage you to experiment with them, but obviously if that doesn't feel right, then it doesn't feel right. And also recognizing that nutrition is closely tied to our identities, personal, familial, cultural, even spiritual. So there's a link between what we eat and our sense of identity. And it may also be associated with difficult experiences. So it's important to acknowledge whatever emotions coming up when we're talking about that. So maybe some overwhelm, some confusion, or maybe shame or anger. So recognize that. That's the first important part, and then really send some self-compassion there, realizing that you're already doing your best, you are enough, that whatever eating habits you may not be happy about is not defining you as a person. So really reminding yourself of that, and really bringing less judgment and just more curiosity into the topic, and see how that shifts your relation to what we say. All right. So that said, we're going to go through all the nutrients that we are getting through food, and we're going to really explore in which ways they are all important, and then say a few things about if there's things that are better or worse, or whatever. The first one is fats, and that's one that usually has a bad press. So we're going to kind of demystify that a little bit, and hopefully kind of deconstruct any myths that you may have there. So fats are very important because first, the brain is made up of 60% fat, which is called the DHA. And so it's the fat we eat provide energy and lubrication for the brain. And it's also essential because some nutrients and vitamins are absorbed through fat and are just fat soluble. So if we don't have the fat, then we're not going to be able to absorb those nutrients or to actually absorb those vitamins like A, D, E, and K. The fats that we eat as well provide the essential fatty acids, the omega-3, 6, AA, and those are essential to allow the neurotransmitters to flow properly, and they're essential for the cell membrane's integrity as well. So in terms of what is to avoid or not, well, really any type of fat is fine. Even the saturated ones that had bad press for a while, they're not to be avoided at all costs. We need actually some saturated fat. What may have been worrying at some point is that through animal products, we tend to get more saturated fat than we need. So that may be why it has been kind of a push to be careful about the saturated one. So it's getting them through different sources so that we don't get too much of them. So maybe getting them from fishes, avocados, nuts, seeds, oils is fine. The one that is to be avoided is the trans fats, the ones that are basically not natural. So the trans fats, the hydrogenated ones, the partially hydrogenated ones, margarines or shortenings. Those are the ones that are actually man-made, they're not in nature, and those are not good for our organism. Another thing to pay attention to is the temperature point where the oil is actually degrading. So if you're cooking with oil, it's important to use one that doesn't degrade at the temperature you're going to cook. Coconut oil and olive oil are usually the ones that they have the higher temperature points. Those are safe for cooking. All right, so hope that clarifies a little bit on the fat side. So let's move to the protein ones. So proteins are very important as well. I think they have less bad press. So they produce the amino acids, which are the building blocks of the neurotransmitters. So they are very important for the brain as well. They support growth and repair in the body, so which means that it's very important to have protein when we are under stress. Or want to recover from stress, or to high level of exercise, or when we're aging and muscle mass is decreasing, we need that to grow back and repair the body. So very important. It's better to get it from a variety of food as well. So we all know about the animal sources of protein. So they're meat and fish and eggs, dairy. On that, the important thing is to get high quality ones because those lower quality ones may not have as much protein and nutrients actually, and may have some contaminants, toxins and chemicals. So for fish, for example, it's important to have those that are less likely to be farmed, and the sockeye one, the red salmon, cannot be farmed, so that's probably a better option because it's less likely to be contaminated, for example. But plant sources of protein is maybe the ones that we know less about. And that's protein in a lot of plant. The soy-based, so like the tofu, the edamame soybeans, soy milk is pretty well known, but also there's a lot of protein in quinoas, in beans and seeds like hemp seed, pumpkins, chia seeds, in oats, in nut butters, nettles. So a lot of plant sources of proteins as well. And it's important to have some at each meal as well. And we're going to see more why as well later. But having a little bit of protein in each meal is important, including breakfast and snacks. All right. So what about carbohydrates now? So those ones also have kind of bad connotations sometimes. So I want to kind of talk more about those as well, because they're critical because they provide the energy. And they also, so they are the one breaking down into sugars, which we do need to support brain function. So it is important. It also regulates the fat metabolism. And essentially, and very importantly as well, it provides, it contains fibers, and those fibers are the prebiotics, which are the food for the probiotics. So we're going to talk about that more in the next slide. But yeah, so let's see about this mechanism there. So when we eat carbohydrates, if they have fibers, that's the one we want. We want some with fibers. And if we drink water at the same time as well, this really helps gut health, proper digestion, because the fibers are the one that clean out our colon, so essential. And with good digestion comes good mental health as well, as we can see. It also has that very important roles to play in the feeling of fullness. And so it regulates the appetite. So once your body has the fibers, it feels full, so it doesn't ask you to eat more. There's also a role it plays in the rate that sugar gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and we're going to see that in the next slide again. And it regulates cholesterol. So why? Because those fibers provide the soluble fibers, which are the prebiotics, which is the food for the probiotics. And the probiotics are really important. So I forgot to mention that those fibers are not digestible, and that's why they're being eliminated. But they are very important into those mechanisms here. So the probiotics are sometimes actually called psychobiotics because they have such an important role to play in the way we feel, actually, in our mental health. And so those are the good bacteria. So the prebiotics actually help feed the probiotics, but also put in check the bad bacteria. So it really helps with that balance between the two. So it helps the bad bacteria not to proliferate. So the good ones, what do? They're really living organisms that support the digestive system. They help produce the nutrients, like the vitamins, the fatty acids, the short chain fatty acids that we were mentioning before. And they're also involved into the secretion of neurotransmitters like GABA and serotonin. So they're actually involved. Having them help us get those chemicals in balance. So we have them hopefully when we are born, but they are affected actually by the type of birth we had. If it was traumatic, that kind of affected our probiotics from birth. Stress also affects the probiotics, so it can be important to actually nourish and replenish those probiotics through eating fermented food, for example, and I listed some of them. Some may feel a little bit more accessible to you, like yogurts, Yakult, kefir, and sauerkraut, pickles. I don't know what you would be willing to try, but hopefully try to pick one that you feel would be acceptable for your taste. And if you feel that that you're maybe liking those good bacteria. All right, so next very important topic there that the carbohydrates are involved in is that blood sugar regulation. And it's very important to regulate that level of sugar in the blood, because when we are having a high concentration of sugar in our blood, we tend to feel good. It releases good feelings, and we feel energized, and we have a feel-good feeling. And sometimes if it gets too high, it's a little bit too energized or too dopamine filled. But when it goes down, that's where really the mood can be affected a lot. A drop of glucose can mood changes, like feeling irritable or anxious, has that sensation of maybe fainting or feeling shaky. Craving would appear when the glucose starts to get low, maybe being foggy, confused, inattentive, having a headache. So that really drop in glucose can affect mental health a lot. So it is important to keep it as stable as possible. So how can we do that? And also what is important is that by having those ups and downs, if those ups and downs are too up and too down, since it's the adrenal who regulates that or helps regulate it, well, that exhausts the adrenal system, and that can affect its efficiency. It gets exhausted and it's not as able to do that regulation. So how can we support that regulation? So back again, the fibers are key, because if we eat fibers, then that actually slows the rate that the glucose gets absorbed. So instead of peaking, it goes slower. And also, if you eat the carbs mostly from fruits and vegetables, they are not as calorie dense than other sources like sugars or refined carbohydrates. So they're not as quickly assimilated as well. So they would come in and get assimilated slower. So the peak is not going to be as quick and as high. And another thing that can help is to mix those carbohydrates with high quality proteins and fats. So basically never eating carbohydrates naked. That's how we call the naked carbs. So always kind of have carbohydrates with proteins and fat. And why? It's because the same thing, it helps kind of slowing this uptake of glucose. And another way to regulate that is same as what we said before, is eating when we're hungry and stopping when we're full. And that may mean eating more often, and that would let this up and down be much softer, not with such a high amplitude. All right, so I hope that was clear. And protein helps. So since you're not having the drop, then your body is not getting the signal as well, I'm so hungry. So it helps you feel full longer as well. That's the important part. All right, so what are those carbs? Because it's a big category actually. So it has the fruits, mushrooms, and non-starchy vegetables. Some has a mushroom, they're different categories. That's why I put them separately. But what is important there is actually to try to get a variety of them, and especially a variety of colors. Somehow the colors kind of indicate a specific type of protective properties. So actually eating fruit and vegetables from different color has its importance. So we know that the berries, for example, so the purple ones or bright red ones have antioxidants. And in the greens, there are certain categories that have different properties as well. So we distinguish the bitter greens like arugula, dandelion, watercress, have different properties than the leafy greens, which are the kale, chard, collards, spinach, and the cruciferous vegetables, well, that category by themselves as well, with the broccolis, cauliflowers, Brussels sprouts. So try to get a little bit of those throughout your day or your week, because they all bring something different to the body and to your brain. A little note about preferring to eating them whole. That's just because you tend to just eat more if they're dried or juiced or in smoothies. So you may not realize that you're full before you eat a little bit too much than what you actually need. But that's the only caveat there. And other types of carbohydrates are the starchy vegetables, legumes, whole grains. So all those are part of the carbs too. And so the starchy vegetables are more like the potatoes, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, acorn squash, legumes, plenty of them, beans, lentils, split peas, etc., seeds, whole grains or cereals, a wide variety of them as well, rice or meals, some that we may not use as much, millet, buckwheat, these kind of things. And same there, a little bit of a caveat of preferring them whole than floured, because flouring tends to break the nutritive properties of them. But I mean, as everything, it's just a prefer. It's not going to be a 100% that we can do there, and it doesn't have to be. Just being compassionate there about what we can do. All right, well, I think that's pretty much it for the carbs, but we cannot finish this chapter before we talk about inflammation and chronic inflammation. So inflammation is not bad in itself, it's actually very needed to recover from disease, but chronic inflammation is where a problem can lie, because that can show as physical issues like chronic pain or autoimmune disease, digestive issues, but it can also allergies, but it can also show as mental health issues. And there's a big correlation now being done between depression and chronic inflammation. So depression, irritability, bipolar, anxiety, insomnia, all of those have been correlated with chronic inflammation sometimes. So it's important to make sure that our diet is supporting reducing inflammation in our body. And unfortunately, the drugs are not really a big solution for that. It's the main thing is actually having a healthy diet that would support that. And that tends to be a diet that is more towards whole food and less processed food. So the issue with processed food is just that they tend to have less fibers. They tend to have more or lower quality fats in them, and especially they have less nutrients and less of the micronutrients like the antioxidants, the vitamins, the minerals that is barely there in processed food. They tend to have more salt or sugars, and they tend to have things that are not actually food or toxins like pesticides, fertilizers, chemicals, like colorants, additives, preservatives, sweeteners. You're familiar with that. But the big key is that with processed food, we are really increasing the risk of nutrient deficiency. So it's not just what else we're getting in our body as things that may be toxic, but it's also what we're not getting in terms of nutrients. So that's the idea there. So that's a part that may feel a little bit overwhelming now that we've had this overview there, and you may feel, okay, well, there's this and this and this and that I'm not doing right or whatever. So how to go about that and what guiding principle you can use. So first, very important is not to focus on what to take away, and especially not thinking, well, I'm going to need to not eat that forever now, and being very absolute about it, because that's usually not a sustainable way to do things. So it's important to think more in terms of what can I actually add that would bring more support my mental health. Or what can I substitute? Okay, that's just substituting one that is a little bit less healthy for one that is a little bit more healthy. And it doesn't have to be the healthiest either, just a tiny bit healthier. So really thinking more in those terms for making those small adjustments. And that's more important to do like small adjustments than just drastic changes. And also focusing on what you eat on a daily basis and not just the one off here, one off there. Because what he said and what is important is that an imperfect plan done consistently really beats a perfect plan that we would only do rarely. So really paying more attention what we're doing day in, day out. That's what really mostly counts, and not what we do once or twice a week or once per month. That is not as relevant at all. And as I said, going really progressively, maybe thinking more about the continuum of very processed or at zero and totally non-processed and completely whole food plant-based on 10. Well, kind of get we're all in a continuum there, and really going there progressively and more through experimentations of maybe 2 weeks or a month of changing one thing and see if that works for you. If it created a change, and if it did, well, great, and that brings more motivation to continue. If it didn't, but you actually have fit it in your habits now and it's not a big deal to actually continuing it, well, that's a win as well. And also thinking that once you're up in the levels, like maybe 7, 8 or whatever, well, not thinking that you have to stay at 10 all the time. No, you can also be at 8 one day, 9 one day, whatever. It's not perfection that we're talking about. It's important to have flexibility without feeling guilty that we've not been at 10 today. That's what's going to make things sustainable and bring a much more healthy relationship with food. And also getting rid of that idea of the willpower thing, because it's more about preparation. I mean, it's of course when we're going to be in the hunger scale of like 1 or 2, we're not going to have, it's not going to be about willpower anymore, right? We're going to be stressed and we're going to need to eat right away. That's what our body is going to ask and need. So it's more important to prepare so that in those times where when we are exceptionally at a 1 or 2, we have something healthy already ready that we can pick up right away. So that's thinking of those in those terms is much more empowering than thinking that we always have to have willpower, which is not the case. We're going to be stressed and we're going to miss it. All right. So a little bit of a word about what is beyond food, and that's where, because we can do a lot through diet, through the food that we eat, but it may there may be some individual cases where we've been depleted from those nutrients for so long that they may need a little bit more to do than getting them through our diet. Or there may be some underlying issues that really keep things in imbalance. So we need to assess for those first. So that may be the part where you may need support from a medical provider. Could be your doctor or functional medicine doctor or naturopath or what we call the nutritionist, psychiatrist now, or dietitians. So a lot of medical provider would be able to assess that for you. So one thing to look for is the thyroid issues, because those can be correlated with mental health issues like depression, for example. So making sure that the thyroid is functioning properly is very important. Then maybe assess for deficiencies, and those can be actually assessed by a blood test, for example, like the B complex vitamins can be tested, the D vitamins can be tested. Magnesium is not very reliable though, so because it's your body is going to do whatever it takes to keep their magnesium in the blood at a proper level, but that may mean that there's a deficiency somewhere else in the body. So those tests for magnesium may not be as relevant. So it's watching for the signs as well. That's why I indicated how it can show. So essential fatty acid there, I have not indicated, but it can show as depression, bipolar, psychotic disorders as well. So something to watch for. And so if that happens to be deficient, then taking a high quality DHA, EPA rich oil is a fish from fish or vegan. It's fine. What you need to know about those is that they need to be kept in the fridge. That's very important, otherwise they degrade. And it's better to take them with food because that can affect your digestive function there. Well, it can be hard to digest sometimes, those type of oils. So that for those fatty acids. For the B complex, that can show as fatigue, apathy, depression, because those vitamins are essential for the adrenal function. For the stress response and for the neurotransmitter production. So if those neurotransmitters are not getting there properly, then that can affect mental health, obviously. So that you can be tested for it. So you can check your levels and if needed, taking a supplementation. There's some B50 complex, for example, so those just need to be careful because they're going to tend to be energizing since they're going to combat the depressed or fatigue state. So take them in the morning so that it doesn't interfere with the sleep, and take them with food as well. So you can be tested for B12 specifically as well. A note on that is that the usual threshold is 200 as a minimum, but for mental health, really it needs to be higher. 450 would be more of what we're looking for as a minimum. So you may want to double check those tests if you have them. And if you're under 450, it's actually probably better to supplement in B12, either for a supplement or a monthly injection. So something to look for. The D vitamins that can show as depression, seasonal affective disorder. It's pretty common to be D vitamin deficient. It needs to be in the 45-65 range. And so to increase that, sun exposure helps, but supplementation may help as well. Just be cautious if you have a kidney disease for those, because that would not be recommended. I think the other ones don't have a particular counter indication there. For magnesium, so as I said, it's difficult to test for it, but the deficiency may show as a hyperarousal state, like maybe anxiety, muscle spasms, nerve issues, ADHD. So anything that is a little bit like keeping you hyper all the time. There's not really any risk of taking any, apart from if you take too much, you're going to get diarrhea. And there's a counter-indication for people with kidney heart medication. So just be careful of that if you have that. So in any case, ask your provider for any interference with what you're already taking, for sure. But in general, that could be advisable to take them, and then you start slow, 100, 200 milligram per day first. And if that doesn't change much, you can increase. And as I said, your body is going to tell you when it had too much, because that's going to change and turn into diarrhea. Another thing to know with magnesium is that it's not absorbed if you're having too much calcium. So check if you're getting calcium supplementation that can interfere with the magnesium. So it may be worth kind of lower the calcium intake if you're absolutely not needing it, and so that the magnesium can be absorbed better. Adrenal support, as we said, that has a big role into the stress support system, and it may show if you're lacking, if your adrenal support is not working very well. It could show as feeling kind of alternatively wired and tired, either in the same day or at once actually, or in the same day or a day after the other. So for that, it's going to go through a lot of what we've already said, but one key aspect is actually to reduce or eliminate caffeine, because caffeine artificially tries to support the adrenal, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. So actually reducing it so that the adrenal can actually be supported the right way is important. And the way it can be supported, as we said, is by eating regularly, because this way it doesn't have to take care of your blood sugar all the time. exercising, managing stress, because it's overworking if you're more stressed. The B vitamins are important for adrenal support as well. And then you can use specific herbs to support it. And we're gonna not go into too much detail there because you're gonna need support to choose it, but it's those things as ginseng, ashwagandha, licorice, that could help with that. Right, and same thing for the adrenal. It's not easy to test either. So that's kind of the caveat there. It's difficult to test for, do I have a good adrenal system or not? All right. Another thing beyond food is basically how we are digesting and in which state we are eating, etc. Because the thing is that digestion only happens in a state of relaxation. So if you're with stress or with lack of sleep, that's going to affect your digestion. So it's not only about what you eat. You may ingest everything that is healthy, but somehow your digestion doesn't do its job. So you're actually not getting the nutrients that you're supposed to bring, and that the food was actually bringing. So you may eat perfectly healthy and bringing everything that it's supposed to need, but then it's not digested correctly and doesn't end up being there for your cells and your brain. So sleep, very important. If you lack sleep, then you're going to be much more likely to have to feel more hungry because it's going to be that emotional hunger of being fatigued. You're going to have more cravings because your body is going to want that energy, that boost. So it's going to crave carbs in particular. So very important to get a good amount of sleep. Another thing is while you eat, to eat as much as possible in a state of more relaxation so that you can bring your vagal nerve to activate your vagal nerve, which is a parasympathetic, to enter in the rest and digest state. And that may mean eating at the table rather than on your desk or in your car, eating with others. This way the flow of conversation kind of slows down the speed at which you eat. Eating and thinking of what you're eating rather than being distracted by TV or something you're watching. Maybe starting with taking a few deep breaths, eating more slowly, chewing well, very important because digestion starts with chewing. So if it's not chewed well, then the stomach is not going to be able to do the job, and there's going to be residues that are not actually being used. So very important there as well. So importance of the stress management to make that happen. So it can go help with deep breathing, relaxation techniques, mindfulness, mindful movements and exercise, and if needed, if there's something to be resolved for therapy or trauma treatment, because trauma can definitely induce a lot of chronic inflammation. So having that trauma resolved can help reducing the inflammation and reducing the overall stress. All right. We are at the end of the presentation now, so I just want to go through the things that I used for this presentation. So you can see some names here. Dr. Leslie Korn has books that you can read if you want. Dr. Kristen Allott, I don't know if she has a book, but I'm sure she has presentations available. And those are some of the links to the articles that I used for the research part. All right, and other things that you may want to find useful are where to find functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, or doctors for mental health. So those are the links where you can find providers if you want. I've also gave some examples of doctors who are very much into nutrition and who has published a lot of resources online. So that can be a very good source of information. So there's Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Andrew Bell, and Dr. Michael Greger. So just check it out and see if that helps providing you more information. All right. Well, we're at the end there. So just wanted to say as well that we're offering health coaching at Eden's, if that's of interest for you. We're also providing individual counseling specifically for food concerns if needing or needed or other mental health concerns. And we have some group programs as well, Make Peace with Food, Eating Disorder Therapy. So that can be done as a group as well. So if you're interested or if you want to contact me for a 15-minute free consultation to see what your needs may be or answer some questions that you may have, just feel free to reach out. There's our phone numbers there, 832-559-2622, or our email, and you'll be redirected to whoever may best support you. So I just want to thank you for watching this recording, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.